Let us study Charles Lamb's essay Dream Children, a Reverie in detail today. Charles Lamb was born in London in 1775 to a poor lawyer's clerk. He was educated at Christ's Hospital, London, where Samuel Taylor Coleridge was one of his contemporaries and a dear school friend. Lamb's early life was almost wrecked by a series of family tragedies. He could not pursue higher studies at any university and entered the South Sea House and later the East India Company's office as a clerk. Lamb did not marry because he had to look after his ailing sister, Mary, cousin Bridget of the Essayists. He did not write much, though he successfully essayed a variety of writings. His masterpieces, however, are the Elia essays, in which Lamb writes under the pen name of Elia and which appeared mostly in the London Magazine. Lamb's style is that of the most amiable type of personal essayist. The topics on which he writes cover a broad spectrum of life, but it is the personal angle, the delightful self-projection through the writings, which contributes to their charm. Lamb is a different essayist because his style is intensely surcharged with the fruits of his wide and rather out-of-the-way reading. But once this difficulty is overcome, the reader quickly falls under the spell of Lamb's charming personality. His admirable blending of humor and pathos, mastery over many varieties of prose style, unfailing expressiveness of language combined with a deep human touch both in the style and the content make Lamb the most delightful essayist in the English language. I've already shared a reading of the essay earlier. Let us look at the summary of the essays. The essay is titled Dream Children, a Reverie. That is, from the title itself, we come to know that he is talking about the children of his fancy, the children of his imagination. But he writes in such a realistic way that we actually believe that he is sitting with his children and telling them a tale. And what does he tell them? It goes like this. Children like to hear about their elders when they were children. So Lamb's children sat around him to listen to the stories of childhood, of his childhood, of their great-grandmother Field, etc. The great-grandmother Field lived in a great house in Norfolk, and the writer talks about, in detail, about the house. He talks about the whole story of the children in the wood, which was carved in wood upon the chimney piece of the great hall, but which was later replaced by a marble chimney piece by a rich owner afterwards. He tells us that great-grandmother Field was not the real owner of the house, but her behavior, her manners, her religious devotions were so great that she was respected by everyone. And she used the house as her own and looked after the house as her own. Later, the ornaments were stripped off, were taken off from the house to the real owner's home, which was in the adjoining country. When Mrs. Field died, her funeral was attended by both the poor and the rich, and people from many miles round came to show their respect for her memory, in her memory. She was indeed a very gentle-hearted and pious person, knew the Psaltery by heart and a great part of the Testament. Lamb keeps the imaginary children and the reader engrossed in the story. He tells them about their great-grandmother's youth, when she was regarded as the best dancer in the country, but when she was attacked by cancer, she could not dance any further, but her spirits were not broken by the disease, and she continued to be good and religious. She used to sleep by herself in a desolate chamber of that great house, and she thought that she saw two apparitions of infants at midnight, but she was sure that they were good creatures and would not hurt her. She was also very kind to her grandchildren and invited them to her place during the holidays. And then Lamb describes in detail how he used to spend hours in gazing upon the old busts of the emperors of Rome. He used to roam around the large, silent rooms of that huge house and look through the worn-out hangings, fluttering tapestry, and carved oaken panels. He also used to hang about in the garden, gazing at the trees and the flowers, and was satisfied thus roaming about, and preferred this to the sweet flavors of peaches and nectarines, and plucking the fruit and enjoying the fruit, such like common habits of children. Then he goes on to tell that the great grandmother Field loved all her grandchildren, but she had a special favor for their uncle John Lamb, because he was a handsome and spirited lad, and while the other children preferred a secluded corner, he used to mount the mettlesome horse and ride around the country and join the hunters. Their uncle John Lamb was really a brave man, and when he grew up to be a man, he won the admiration of everyone. When our author was a lame-footed boy, John, who was a few years senior to him, used to carry him on his back for many miles. And in later life, John, however, became lame-footed, and Lamb is afraid that perhaps he was not as considerate to him and patient with him as John was with him in his childhood. And when John died, Lamb came to miss him very much and remembered his kindness and his crossness and wished him to be alive again. Throughout the essay, we see how Lamb makes the whole scene so realistic, because he incorporates the gestures of the children who are listening to his tale. The children then demanded that Lamb should say something about their dead mother, and Lamb began telling them how for 7 long years he patiently courted the fair Alice Winterton. And as he was relating these experiences of his, he suddenly felt that the eyes of that old Alice were gazing from the face of the little Alice sitting before him. And as Lamb looked and looked, it seemed that the 2 children, John and Alice, were receding from him. At last, just 2 mournful features were left out of them, and they told him that they were neither of Alice nor of Lamb, that they were not children at all. For the children of Alice and had Bartram for their father, so they were merely dreams. And it is at this point that Lamb woke up and found himself sitting in his bachelor armchair where he had fallen asleep with the faithful Bridget by his side. Bridget, as I've already mentioned, is Lamb's sister, uh, and the two of them lived together. And Charles Lamb looked after his ailing sister. So the essay, Dream Children, is a reverie which was occasioned by, it is said, Lamb's loneliness. In fact, the immediate reason behind the creation of this essay was the death of his brother John, an event which filled in Lamb's life an utter sense of loneliness and frustration. The essay is noted for its autobiographical description. It unveils the author's soul. Lamb's memory takes us back to those good old days of great-grandmother Field. And what Lamb tells about those days is true. We can actually see, as we read, little Lamb roaming about the large lonely rooms gazing at the marble statues. We also come to know about his brother John, who had just passed away, and how Lamb missed him. Lamb's love affair with Alice Winterton, whom he could not marry because of his responsibilities, and who got married to a Mr. Bartram, is also revealed through the essay. So there are a number of autobiographical touches in the essay. But what is important is the undercurrent of pathos in the essay. It is at every step, particularly in the end, when the dream children of Lamb vanish as airy nothings. There can be no greater pathos anywhere than suggested by the words spoken by the dream children at the end of the essay. And I quote, "We are not of Alice, nor of thee, nor are we children at all. The children of Alice call Bartram father. We are nothing less than nothing and dreams. We are only what might have been, and must wait upon the tedious shores of Lethe millions of ages before we have existence and a name." Unquote. Hamilton Thompson remarks about the pathos in the essay, and I quote again, "Pathos was never achieved with a lighter hand than in Dream Children, the essay suggested by the death of his brother. It was written from Lamb's heart, and the sincerity of his feeling is echoed in the simplicity of the style in which he tells his imaginary audience the story of the old house where he spent so many happy days. But although the melancholy of the writer's loss is quite apparent, although he feels with deep regret the contrast between early hopes and loves and the gradual disillusionment and dwindling friendships of later life, his melancholy is far removed from that of the man who concentrates himself upon his own sorrows and sees those of the rest of the world only in so far they refer to himself. Such an essay could not have been written by one who was shut up in self-contemplation." Unquote. The essay is a remarkable example of Lamb's poetic prose. Mark Hunter comments on this feature of the essay, and I quote, "There is perhaps in the whole of Lamb's writings, nothing so entirely beautiful, nothing so unmistakably the product of genius as this masterpiece of imaginative prose. It is the feeling and thought of poetry in the garb of prose poetry. It is a vision of the might have been, a vision which, as it fades away with the vanishing faces of those dream children, leaves the reader hesitating between two conflicting emotions, admiration and pity. For the essay, curiously made up of blended fact and fiction, is, as a record of the author's feelings, absolutely genuine. It is the wail of a deeply sympathetic, keenly loving soul for whom fate has apportioned solitariness. So read the essay again, listen to the recording of the essay, and listen to the analysis of the essay again. Thank you.